good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Today we'll have two sessions. One is devoted to traditional and innovative methods in archaeology and archaeological science. And the second one will be keynote session where the heads of labs will present the work and the results of their labs. And after all, we'll have discussion. Our first session will be led by Professor of Warsaw University, Malgorzata KOT. So please.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everyone at once. Thank you. First, thank you organizers for organizing this conference. Yeah, I think it's really nice to be able to lead the session. So I think there's no time to lose. So let me start. So I will start from my presentation, unfortunately. So sorry for that. Let me first share the screen. I already practiced a little, so I hope it works. Could you please just confirm that you can hear me and you can see with the presentation?
Yes, everything works perfectly.
Okay, so yesterday we heard a lot about laboratory work. So today I want to take you to the field and to travel a little. And I'm going to take you to Central Asia, to Western Tien Shan. This is the region where we focus our research, and we are working in Western Tien Shan since 2013. The region basically is like, we can estimate, not badly studied. I would say, like in the comparison to other regions, surrounding regions, is rather well studied. So we have, or we had when we started, around 30, maybe 40 settlement spots. I mean, Paleolithic settlement spots already known in the region, mostly Middle Paleolithic, but there were also single Upper Paleolithic ones. And we also focused on this Middle to Upper Paleolithic transitional period in this very region. Why this region is interesting? It's mostly because it's on the way, or potential way, of modern human expansion toward the eastern and northern parts of Asia. So we wanted to study this this particular region to see if we can see this kind of migration. Is it ephemerical? And also to pose the question, could we see the high mountain settlement in the region? Because majority of the sites which were studied before, these were the sites located in the big valleys. So we wanted to go more into the mountains to study the mountain settlement and to see how it's working. So actually, the first obstacle we could see while starting our research is actually the landscape. So the mountain landscape, which is very heterogeneous, and it's hard to conduct the real ordinary surveying, as you can imagine. So after 5 years of surveying, we were managed to find 5 new archaeological sites, and we had a feeling it's not enough. So simultaneously, we were excavating 2 archaeological sites. So the new knowledge was get, but we wanted to get further. So we wanted to find new sites. And sometimes we thought like we are the children in the fog, really not knowing where we are searching. And I think the changing point for this project was one day when we came back after the whole day of surveying, and we found nothing, not a single flake. And it was really like disappointing. Like we came back to the car, and then we met our driver, the local Uzbek driver, and he said, "I knew you will never find anything in this valley." And I was surprised. I said, "Why?" And then he said, yeah, because you know, in this valley, when you were walking today, the snow usually melts 1 month later than the other places in the region. And then he added, yeah, but you know, the archaeological site you were excavating, this Katosai site, this is interesting because in this site, the snow melts even 1 month before the normally in the region. So it's without snow already in the February. And two thoughts came to my mind when I was listening to him. The first thought was like, I think this local native people will always have the knowledge, which we will never get as archaeologists, as scientists, and some intuitions which are like normal for them. So it's really good to listen to them. But the second thing which came immediately after was like, we should be a little bit smarter while searching for new sites. So let's try to predict the regions or the places where to go, and let's try to find really nice places and the most promising places for Paleolithic settlement in the region in order to enhance and to make it faster, our research. So first starting point was actually, we knew that most of the Paleolithic sites we find, the opener sites, are located within the less cover, because the less sediments is the Pleistocene sediment, which contains the Paleolithic settlement. So we knew that we are within the less cover place, and there are some patches of less. So we try to use the most accurate and detailed geological maps. We redraw them into GIS and try to use it. But then we realized that these old maps, which are the only one available so far, these are not accurate enough. So they can be used in a really like big scale research when we could spot places where less is or there is no less sediment. But in our case, when we really need very detailed maps, it simply doesn't work. So it's not accurate enough. So then we say, okay, we need to like drop geology. Let's think of other ways of thinking, how to find the places where the Pleistocene sediment can be still preserved. And we thought a little, and we realized that basically this landscape which we are analyzing is very dynamic from erosional point of view. So the erosion is really like dynamically working there. So we thought maybe or we should pick these places which have very certain slope inclination, so the low slope inclination, because if the slope inclination is higher, then we will not find the Pleistocene sediment anymore in the place. So for this reason, we used elevation data. The best for now obtainable is SRTM data. And we just calculated, and this I will here focus on one valley, which was our testing, the testing place for this modeling. So we thought, okay, let's choose first the slopes of the inclination 0 to 20 degrees, and here the green you have marked all the slopes with this very inclination. But on the other side, we thought, okay, we can already see that majority of the sites we do have are located on the south or southwestern expositions of the slopes. And this goes along with the snow melting issue. So I thought maybe let's try to find such slopes with southwestern and southeastern inclination exposition in order to diminish or to limit the range. So these are all the slopes with the exposure of south, southwest, and southwestern, and then we just merged these two factors. And for this, this is actually the regions with both these factors at the same time. So by like adding these two factors, we already managed to limit the research area or the potential research area to 20% of the original ones. It's already like a big gain. So 80% of work is already done. So the next step was also to include the hydrology. So I thought only the present hydrology is of course available, but we included it. We just put the buffers of, around the sources and around the streams, the recent streams, and we were trying to show to see these regions which are the nearest to the water, the recent water sources. So this is how the model works. So the hydrology, then you have the elevation data, and the geology which didn't work. And as a result, we determined 25 research areas, so the little places which we really wanted to go and to search in detail. And within one season, one research season, we just focus on these 25 research areas. In a consequence, we were just walking around and saying, here you have just a track of one person, but there were always two, sometimes three people walking. So this research area was wider than here tracked. In a consequence, we managed to research 21 research areas, and we were able to find 19 new settlement points and 9 new archaeological sites. These are only Paleolithic sites here, marked here. As a settlement point, we count for places with less than 3 artifacts. So we have 9 new archaeological sites found within one research season. And here are the sites marked in colors and the settlement spots. And as an example, I just want to show you how it looks now. So before we came to this valley, there was not a single flake found in this very valley. And here you can see that almost on each hill, a less hill, you can see some artifacts and sometimes even sites, archaeological sites located. So there is quite a dense concentration of Paleolithic sites in this very valley which we searched. And 2 examples which I want to show you, really interesting, of 2 different kinds of preservation of sites. So Site 9 site, which is located just above the flint outcrop. It's really interesting because we tested it this year, and there is no preservation of artifacts in situ in the stratified position. So we have around 200 artifacts on the surface, but no stratified archaeology. Interestingly, there is almost no artifacts made on flints, even though the site is located on the flint outcrop. Majority of artifacts are made of effusive rocks, which were just brought down from the valley. So it's quite interesting for us. And the inventory looks very similar to what we get normally in the region. So these Levallois-based industries which go toward initial Upper Paleolithic. And the other one, which was found this year, is quite different. Here we have more than 600 artifacts on the surface, and we were able to find multiple, at least 4 archaeological horizons stratified so far in the testing pit. So we will focus next year in this very assemblage, which is both on effusive rocks and flints. So it's also very interesting to see these flint artifacts within the assemblage, relatively the same typology. Just to conclude how this predictive model works. So basically, for the Uzbekistan, the geology or the geological map doesn't work. So they are not too accurate enough for us. So we would need to make our own geological maps. So this is something what we cannot use, but in future where the new maps appears, this would be really helpful, of course. For the slopes, this is really interesting because the colorful area is the area of 0 to 20 degrees. The white is the slope of the higher inclination. And you can see that the majority of artifacts are actually found on this 16 to 20 degrees slope inclination. And almost no artifacts we find in the flat levels. So we assume that these sites, these are actually mostly surface sites, but these are sites which are currently eroded. So these are not sites which were eroded like hundreds of thousands of years ago and they're lying on flat surfaces, but we are just finding sites which are currently under erosion. So this is also some interesting result we got. And from the slope inclination of majority of the sites we found, we can see that also there is quite a substantial number of sites which are located also on western slope inclination expositions. So we should probably extend our predictive model toward also the western exposition. The hydrology, this is interesting. It actually doesn't work. So we do see some sites which are located far from the sources of the water, the recent sources. So we presume that either the hydrology changed, and it's rather possible, or the people were living there also during, for example, the winter season when you have the water sources in the like you can use snow as a water source. The hydrology doesn't actually work for this for our predictive modeling. And the last conclusion, I would say, in the future, we think to use also slope shading. This is the method which is used in Himalaya to predict the melting of the ice sheets. As long as we see that the most sunny places are preferable for Paleolithic people, so we can also assume that the shading, slope shading, especially if we are in the high mountains, can have some effect on the positioning of the sites. So we would like to include it in our modeling, and also the visibility analysis, which for now we did like post factum. After finding the sites, we can see that majority of sites are located in the places where you really have a really great view on the surrounding. So perhaps in the future we will be able to include it like within the model itself to search new sites. And so here is the publication, which was recently published and presents our results. And within the region, just the last words to conclude. So the red rectangle shows the region we focus. So before there were like 3 or 4 sites known, and here on the map you see the new sites which were found since we started the research. So I think it shows the great potential which such predictive modeling has, especially in the high mountain archaeology. And I hope we'll be able to extend our model to other regions of Tien Shan and to show, to see how it works. And if we really do have such intensive settlement also in other parts of the research area. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm waiting for the questions.
I have a comment. May I?
Yes, Ksenia, of course. I cannot see you.
I don't know, something happened with my video. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
So I just want to tell that it's a really great approach because everybody knows who was working in Central Asia that to find the new site, it's a huge slog. And the slog could be happened, I don't know, once in 5 years and 10 years. When we was working in Uzbekistan, so we find with the help of the local people only the Dikatim, Katasai and Kızılalma, but it's exposed material. So, and it is more than 15 years of studying, of research. So, and now, so if the modeling gave such obvious results, so it could be a key, how to say, case study for the different area, like Near East, Middle East, or something like this. Yeah, because the quantity of the sites increased, and it's really great.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, there is no question. I would like to ask, and it's time. So I would like to ask Filippo ZANGROSSI and colleagues, Davide DELPIANO and Marco PERESANI, to present their result. Filippo is here. Okay, the stage is yours.
Just a second to share the screen. Can you see the full screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much for introducing me. And good morning. As you can see, today I'm going to talk about a new method to analyze the inner structure of artifacts concentration. This method was developed and applied to a Gravetian site, open air, in northern Italy. It's called Piovesello. It shows a single stratigraphic unit dated at 30,000 years ago. In 2013, it was unearthed a single artifact concentration consisting in 123 lithic products that was first interpreted as a fleet workshop. This site is the optimal context to apply this method because it shows it includes a combined documentation method between a standard documentation, which includes the photograph, sketches, and quotes, and a non-standard documentation that is a series of pictures taken to the photogrammetric reconstruction of the surface. Here you can see a scheme of this protocol that is very adaptable to different devices, like a laser scanner or photographs, and to different free and commercial software. Of course, the first step is to digitize all the artifacts. In particular, we use a Konica Minolta Range 5 at the Diaprem laboratory at the University of Ferrara. And then we need to create a local coordinate system. And to do that, we use the 3D georeferenced model of the square surface in order to rectify all the 24 pictures taken to document the removal of this accumulation. To orient these artifacts, we record the same distance between homologous points, both on the 3D model of the artifact and on the picture. The difference of these two values is due to the perspective distortion of the rectified pictures. Using these two values in this formula that you can see, it's possible to calculate the rotation angle to be applied to each one of the Cartesian axes. In this way, we obtain an oriented model. The last step is the translation according to coordinate of the picture and according to the quotes. In this way, we obtain the virtual reconstruction of this accumulation, including the single model of each artifact. I want to underline that is extremely adaptable. This method is extremely adaptable to the viable documentation, meaning you can use both quote or 3D points collected thanks to total station, and both georeferenced pictures, or when they are available, the 3D model of the removal stage. If 3D models of the surface are available, it's better because you can use the 3-point alignment instead of the rotation angle formula, and that speed up the process. Having a three-dimensional reconstruction of the sites of the accumulation, it's possible allow to recover some information lost during the excavation. For example, the orientation and the inclination that, as you know, is often used to detect post-depositional processes. Here, of course, it's fundamental the combination with a traditional analysis. Here you can see two of the most complete multiple refitting of the site of Piovesello. Concerning the dimensional classes, it was possible to distinguish three depositional levels in this accumulation, with the first level composed of big, more than 2 centimeters products, second level of small products, and another one of bigger one. Crossing this data with technological features is possible to see how in the second phase there's an higher amount of full production artifacts and a lower amount of core shaping. The most interesting feature we were able to detect is the extremely high coherency between the refittings, meaning that the first flakes produced are placed below, and the last products are placed above. Moreover, there's no mixing between flakes concerning different refittings. This strongly suggests the primary deposition and the lacking of post-depositional processes. Combining all the data, it's possible to detect 6 main depositional stages, which consist in an alternation of big products, small products, and different refittings. Okay. This method is show different advantages. It's based mainly on a standard documentation, and it's applicable to previously excavated sites. It allows to recover information lost during the excavation, and potentially you can reconstruct entire sites. And it allows to detect the series of action carried out in place and the nature of structures. Moreover, it produces shareable data. Of course, a limitation occurs. The main limitation is that it requires a graphical representation for all the artifacts. In this sense, this method underlines the best documentation practice and the necessity to document in always better during the excavation. Another problem is that is a time-consuming method, and to solve this issue, we are going to automate the entire protocol in its three main steps. The artifact digitization, we are already working on this. The model location in space, and the automatic clustering. The last step, the automatic clustering, we are near to complete an air packet. Of course, we are going to carry out experimentation in order to detect parameters useful to interpret the archaeological sites. Okay, that's all. Maybe I've been so fast. If there's any question, please just ask. I'll try to answer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any question?
I've got a question. Hi.
Hi.
In the last slide, you talk about the automation of the digitation procedure.
Okay.
How does it work? How the artifact digitation?
I think to base the idea is based on photogrammetric approach, and use a combination of maybe some microcontroller or microprocessor like Arduino or Raspberry in order to create rotating dishes.
Yes.
A series of rotating dishes. Once you take picture of the first artifact, The second artifact substitute the first one in its position and take pictures, like how can I say, catena di montaggio.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, you understand? Okay.
Yeah.
The idea is this one. It it doesn't reduce the time, but it's free from an operator.
It works by itself. You can go to to think about more interesting things meanwhile.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. I hope you'll manage to do it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any more questions? Okay, if it's not the case, I think it's time for the third presentation. Filippo, could you
See, of course.
share the screen? So Nataliya BEREZINA and colleagues about bison sex matters. Potential of using the methods of determining sex of bisons by peptidomic analysis of tooth enable to specify subsistence strategies of ancient humans, please.
Hello, colleagues. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just a second. I need to move full screen.
I think we lost your screen.
The first is to share the screen and then to make a full screen, or the opposite?
Yes. No. First share screen and then make a full screen. And now go to presentation mode.
Okay.
Yes, it works.
Super. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I'm happy to present our preliminary results. We are working on them since some time and not finishing them by now. But we want to speak about the potential of using the methods of sex determination of bison by peptidome analysis of tooth enamel. Determining the taxonomic affiliation and sex of animals based on fossil bone remains is one of the most important questions in studying the lifestyle of ancient people. Determining the species belonging by fragmentary bone remains, in addition to traditional morphological methods, are effectively solved by the methods of genetic analysis and zoos. Determining the sex of animals which were the hunting object for the human according to morphological criteria has a number of difficulties. The common way to estimate sex ratio for bison is the measurement of the extremity of bones, articular surfaces, etc. However, most of the time articulations are destroyed by humans during the butchering process for the graze extraction or buried. In addition, these extremities are less dense than the rest of the bones and are usually destroyed by taxonomic process. Thus, the possibility to access to sex ratio can be very limited in most of the sites. In addition, teeth that are well preserved show a very limited sexual dimorphism in bison. That's why we are suggesting the method of determining the animal sex by peptidome analysis of tooth enamel. The organic matrix of tooth enamel consists of a number of proteins that organize hydroxyapatite, which makes up the enamel into structured rods. Here you can see the structured rods, and in between there should be an organic matrix. After the completion of the maturation of the tooth enamel, the organic matrix degrades and remains in the enamel in the form of peptides. The most important structural proteins of enamel are amelogenin, ameloblastin, and enamylin. Amelogenin is an essential protein of tooth enamel, which in most of euterian mammals contain 2 copies, in both X and Y chromosome each, and are expressed as protein in the tooth organ. About 80% of amelogenin in male and 100 in female teeth is synthesized from the X chromosome, but part of amelogenin in male is synthesized from the Y chromosome. So there are 2 forms of peptides, amylix and amyli, which mark the sex. Amelogenin genes are well-studied genetic markers of the X and Y chromosomes and for a long time have been a basis of forensic sex determination. But we propose to study not the genes responsible for the synthesis of peptides, but the peptides themselves. Protein is considerably more robust than DNA molecules, particularly when it is physically associated with mineral surfaces, such as tooth enamel. And even in conditions of poor preservation of bone tissue and organics in general, short peptides embedded in enamel are preserved. The comparison of 3 independent methods of sex estimation, proteomic analysis of amelogenin peptides, shotgun sequence DNA, and standard astrological methods to determine the sex of human remains showed that proteomic sex estimation was the most sensitive technique, providing results in all remain tests due in part to the stability of the amelogenin peptide signal. One more advantage of the method is minimization of sample destruction, which is extremely important for the rare and valuable ancient samples and museum objects. Here you can see the first step of the process, etching of tooth enamel with hydrofluoric acid. During this process, the part of the tooth enamel is dissolved and all the further work takes place with this solution. Etching of tooth enamel and extraction of peptides were performed according to the modified technique developed in previous studies on human teeth. Liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry was performed. Peptide sequences were analyzed using the UniProt database for both Paulus and Bovina as a reference. The list of identified proteins contains proteins for which at least 2 unique peptide sequences were determined. Here you can see the result of mass spectrometry of amelogenin peptides for Amelix sequence. For male and female individuals, the picture of peptide sequence is more or less the same, with some differences due to preservation and individual characteristics. And here are the same individuals, but we're looking on Amelix peptide sequence and the space where we can identify peptides for male individuals. For female, we couldn't identify any, and that is the difference we can see. The first series of experiments was carried out on a sample of teeth of modern bisons. Their comparative samples are composed of teeth from bison with known sex, age, and date of death. The individuals were raised in half-liberty conditions at the Jean Luthier farm in the center of France. 1 incisor per individual was selected for our analysis. By the method of blind testing, we determined the sex of the bisons, which 100% considered with the sex according to the collection inventory. And so we go to the second part of our investigation. The second part of the experiment was to test the sex of Paleolithic bison. 10 samples, 9 permanent and 1 deciduous tooth were investigated. For the experiment, only the bisons from cultural layers, so it were the bisons that were killed by human, were taken. The short characteristic of site is the ZIGANSHIN site, Middle Paleolithic site. Here we can see 2 samples from it. The lithic industry is attributed to the Kina-Mostierian, and the deposit occurred during Mies IV. The second site from France is Logeribas, is the Upper Paleolithic site with 3 Magdalenian cultural layers, and we took 1 sample from there. Volchi Grot is the Crimean site, which contains 2 Middle Paleolithic cultural layers and lithic assemblage belong to Mikhokian culture. And 3 samples from Chigurskaya cave were used, coming from Middle Paleolithic occupation levels. The lithic assemblage has been identified as easternmost manifestation of Mikhokian technocomplex. Here you can see the results of our investigation. We identified 2 male bisons that were 2 young male bisons, and the rest were female bisons. So here we can see a tendency of prevalence of female bisons at the ancient samples in comparison with modern collection where we took random samples according to sex. So here we come to discussion. We know from ethnographic and archaeological data the economy of many populations of ancient people directly dependent on the migration seasonality of bison. The most complete data are known from the works on the role of bison in the life of Native Americans, which indicate that sex and age of bison, which were hunted, does not characterize the herds, but rather characterize the selection strategies of hunting. During spring and summer, after the birth period, female feed calves and are very careful in their behavior and significantly lost weight and quality of meat. On the contrary, at the end of the summer, around the rut phase, the behavior of male became unpredictable and males in turn lost a lot of weight in connection to the rut. The selection of a specific prey is directly influenced by the quality and quantity of raw material, such as meat, skins, etc., and its particular behavior. So this characteristic evolved during the year differently for male and female. Consequently, to better understand the subsistence strategy developing by past human population, in addition to seasonality, identifying the sex of the prey is essential. So the new data that we can potentially obtain as a result of the application of this analysis gives us the opportunity to reconstruct the hunting preferences of ancient populations and get closer to understanding their lifestyle. And of course, the perspective of this method is to continue sex determination of human teeth, preservation of which does not allow the study of DNA. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
We have a comment once more. I just want to tell that the most, how to say, widespread method as a genetic is quite expensive to use it to determine the sex. So that kind of method Natasha mentioned, Natasha talks about, it's much cheaper, and the quality of it, it's like 100%. So it's really great, and we plan to distinguish all the sex of the Neanderthals at Chigirskaya cave. So that was the real aim of that work. Yeah, and to know the structure of the ancient population and everything like this. So because we have separate teeth, and so we cannot use any anthropology to recognize it, and of course we know several sex of several individuals by after genetics, but I think that it is the only way for us if you don't want to spend too much time and money.
Not every tooth you have could be used as a genetic sample, because there are some destroyed teeth.
Yes, non-destructive methods. It's also prevalent. Yeah. So genetic and distinguishing of the sex could be different, but in any way it's useful in both cases.
Thank you very much. Are there other comments or questions? So if it's not the case, I think we can go to another presentation. As you could see, we had this chat with Arina that Radu is not here yet, or maybe he's hidden under someone else's name.
No, I think he's not here right now, but his talk will be after mine, so he has 20 minutes to wake up.
Yes, I think New York is really a deep morning. Okay, Arina, I think it's time for you and the strontium analysis. So
yes, thank you.
Let's start.
Okay. Everything is fine with my presentation? Okay, great.
Yes, yes, we can see.
So, hello again. I'm pleased to introduce you our first results of our project on isotopic study of Middle and Upper Paleolithic sites in Mongolia. As we all know, bioavailable strontium directly depends on isotopic composition of the bedrocks. Basically, bedrocks are the source of strontium isotopes for the soil, water, and plants. Animals get the strontium isotopes using these resources, and strontium isotopic composition in enamel and dentine will depend on where individuals spend the last and first years of his life. Getting strontium composition, we are able to understand whether or not the animal spent entire life in one region or migrated. To go further and reveal the birth region, we need an isotopic map. Such isotopic maps have been created and published for a number of regions. For example, for Israel, if you look closely at the geological map on the left, you can see that isotopic map correlates with this. The same we can see on the geological and strontium isotopic maps for France and China. And here you can see quite a general tectonic map instead of detailed geological. Every map is complex research based on field work and geological and geomorphological predictive modeling. And we saw this from your talk, Malgorzata. And the latter creates some problems that we'll discuss later. Having such map, it is possible to trace different kinds of migrations. Like, for example, it was done for steppe bison from Alaska who migrated in relatively short distances. It is also possible to use studying the transportation of material for personal ornaments made of organic material, especially teeth and ostrich eggshell, or transportation of personal ornaments itself, and even possible different kinds of trade. Such kind of research was done for example, for ostrich eggshell beads in Africa. Results indicated that these beads have been transported and were the part of complex system of interaction between different groups of people. And strontium ratio also indicated that Neanderthal female didn't travel in more than 50 kilometers. So it's quite useful tool in Paleolithic study. Since there is no map for Mongolia where I work, we decided to create such kind of map, at least to begin to create. Unfortunately, coronavirus corrected our plans, and we decided to take samples on the border of Altai and Mongolia. Unfortunately, not only coronavirus, but also plague ruined our plans. It happens almost everywhere on the border of Altai and Mongolia. Local people eat marmots, and as we know, marmot transport plague. This area was also closed for visitors. But we were on our way to Altai, we had money, and we decided, okay, we'll collect samples throughout Altai. And so as you can see, we visited several localities. In our team, we had a chemist who actually analyzed all samples. And if you have any questions about isotopes, you have to ask her, not me. And we had geologists because the problems that Malgorzata previously mentioned, it created the problems for sampling for isotopes. When we visited the places that we already mapped for sampling, because we needed to take samples from specific geological environment, and we realized that the map is wrong. So we corrected our protocols right in the field. So we took samples far from the places of human activity, especially fields, to avoid the contaminations of the samples. From each point, we sampled water, grass, and soil. And if we saw that geological map is wrong, we also collected the samples of bedrocks. We used the pretreatment protocol, which is published on the web page of the lab where we do this. It's Institute of Geochemistry in Yekaterinburg. So as you can see, we tried to take each sample from different geological environment to get the full picture of strontium composition spectrum in Altai. But also the second goal was to take samples near the most important Paleolithic sites, especially the caves. So it would make our map useful for people who work at this Paleolithic sites. And we already got first results, but as you can see, our map is not extremely detailed for now, but it's just the first part of the samples. The further samples are under investigation right now. And as you can see, if we will generate all published data for China, Mongolia, and Altai on the border with Mongolia, we can see that actually we basically have no data for Mongolia and Altai. There was only one research here. The group of researchers studied the movements of modern domesticated sheep. So, and this data is published, and we used this. In 2021, luckily, Mongolia opened the border, and we were able to work there, specifically in Gobi Desert. And again, we needed to change our protocol because within 1 year, the new protocol for sampling for strontium isotopes was published, and it has been proved that only plant samples are basically enough for isotopic map. Anyway, we are going to use all our probes, including water and soil, to do our own experiments. But for Gobi, we used this new protocol and collected only annual plants and animal teeth to carry out also some experiments. And there are a lot of dead animals in Gobi, so we didn't have any problems with that. And now I'll tell you what kind of results we already got. So 3 stratified Paleolithic sites in Arkhon Valley have been found in previous years. It's Arkhon 1, 7, and Meltinam. And they have yielded the longest cultural and stratigraphic sequences anywhere in Mongolia, including Middle and Upper Paleolithic. Our project aimed initially at redating these 3 localities and understanding their paleoenvironmental context, began in 2018 with the re-excavation of these sites. We have some evidence of human-animal interactions here. It's like, for example, the probable evidence of hunting with spear or something like that. We don't know for now, but there is a horse scapula with the impact of kind of point. We also have ostrich eggshell beads and different kinds of bones, including this Baikalian yak, which is extinct, Baikalian yak mandible with anthropogenic modifications. And we also know what kind of animals people hunted here in Middle and Upper Paleolithic. There are 3 basic species, or like group of species. It's yak baikalensis, different kinds of horses and mountain sheep. Their bones are predominant in the layers, and they have traces of butchering. Much less, but regular, we can find remains of woolly rhinoceros and wild ass, also with traces of butchering. And also there are 3 species that have been found in Arkhon Valley, but they are not character for this environment. First of all, it's Chiru or Aronga, which currently lives only in Tibet at the high altitudes. It's mammoth with traces of butchering, and Cynomegaloceros. It's not the megaloceros that lived throughout Siberia. No, it's the Cynomegaloceros, which connects Arkhon Valley with China. Multnomah was probably the location of longer-term occupation, so we began with that. Archaeological material there has been heavily reworked and partially redeposited. We have identified 6 lithological layers, and layers 2, 3, and 4 are deformed along one vertical line, which is probably the result of cryogenic processes. Layer 2 contains most of the archaeological material that was redeposited from other strata. Preliminary OSL dates support this hypothesis. There is a discrepancy between new radiocarbon and OSL dates, as you can see on the picture. OSL dates and the colluvial origin of sediments from layer 4, 5, and 6 indicate that archaeological material there was buried over a very short period of time as a result of catastrophic events. And we collected multiple samples for various types of geochemical analysis, and we used the following protocol to sample the bones for strontium analysis. We collected soil samples above and under the bone sample to reveal the difference in meanings and fix probable contamination or impact of fluvial processes on composition of strontium isotopes. And we analyzed the chemical composition of sediments, the distribution of trace and rare earth elements in layers from 1st to 4th of Multnomah section. And it's very uniform. In layer 5, the concentration of elements is twice as high. This can be explained by the difference in the lithological composition of the sediments themselves. Nevertheless, the sediments do not contain any anomalous trace elements and are geochemically comparable to PAS clay rocks, indicated that they are well mixed. And variations of geochemical indicators along the section are also very small. This suggests that no major climatic changes occurred during the accumulation of this section. And because we took the soil samples to compare with results for bone samples, we also could use it just to compare with other geochemical methods. So the variation in strontium isotopic composition in sediments is not so great. The strontium ratio decreases from top to bottom, also indicating the lack of sharp climatic changes. Also, we can see the effect of redeposition in layers 2 and 4. You can see 2 points on the graph lie outside the trend line. We believe the reasons for this include mixing and transportation of sediments. And we tried to reconstruct the paleoclimate by geochemical methods using also thorium-uranium ratios and the relationship between light and heavy rare earth elements. Both indicate a semi-arid, semi-humid climate that was more humid than at present. So finally, going back to animals, we analyzed several teeth from all 3 sites. Yak and horse teeth indicate that life cycles of these animals were associated with Arkhon Valley only, except 1 horse tooth from the Arkhon 7 section. The strontium ratio of the enamel is different. Since it is known that the enamel of herbivores reflects the strontium isotopic composition of the grass they consumed during their first years of life, and the enamel isotopic composition is different than the isotopic composition of sediments, we suggest that these animals grazed in the different region during their first years of life, not where they were found in the Arkhon Valley. So, and it can be explained by the fact that according to paleontological analysis, we have different horse species that inhabited the Arkhon Valley. So probably different species of horses had different behavior. So we'll know later. And that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Arina. Are there any questions for the isotopical matters? I have a question. Can I ask, because we were doing strontium analysis for human remains in Poland, and maybe it's just the Polish problem, but we do have problem of taking samples of the soil and the plants due to the use of fertilizers in the fields and so on. So as far as I understood our specialist, he is more toward taking water samples, and he believes that this resembles more the original strontium. So how is it in your region? I guess it's less.
Yeah, we don't have such problems in Mongolia, obviously. We have problems with water there, especially in Gobi Desert. But yeah, they basically don't have too much fields, and they don't use fertilizers so much. So we had this problem in Altai, yes, but there is a problem that water also goes through the fields, and from the point of view of our chemists, it's more reliable to take plants from the areas without fields, fertilized fields, than in the water, because we don't know exactly where this river or stream goes through. Maybe it already brought some fertilizers. So we were trying to find the areas without fields and took samples there. Of course, it's quite difficult because you need very specific geological environment, because you need to have the specific bedrocks. So yes, we had such problems too.
Okay, thank you. I think Ksenia was supposed to say something.
Yeah, I have a question, Arina. On your sites, and all the animals you mentioned have been came after the hunting activities of the ancient humans?
You've been frozen in the beginning of your question.
Sorry. Did you check the carnivore activity on the bones of the animals, or everything came from the hunting activity of the ancient human?
No. For strontium analysis, we basically took the samples of teeth, because it's more reliable samples. You can use enamel and dentine. We don't have any carnivorous activities on our in Arkhon Valley. We have very high activity of hyenas in Gobi. It's a Ganagui cave, and yes, we of course documented this. But for Arkhon Valley, basically, it seems like human was the main predator there, so we didn't find any modifications on the bones that we can describe as made by carnivores. And because we have enough bones from Arkhon Valley, we mostly try to use for isotopic analysis and for dating the bones that have been modified by human.
But you have almost complete mandibulus. So
yes.
and huge part of the complete bones. So it does it related to the type of the sites, because usually, at least at Altai, if you will find the complete mandibula, it will be the evidence for the carnivore activity. Because when human met mandibulas, they destroyed it, crushed it.
This is the only mandible that we found at the Arkhon 1 site in Middle Paleolithic horizon, and it had been flaked. The paleontologist described it as the anthropogenically modified mandible. There is like basically the flaked surface, not carnivorous. So. But yes, we interpret this these sites. I mean, like occupational episodes in Middle Paleolithic at Arkhon 1 and Arkhon 7 as short-term episodes, probably like the short-term camp of hunters, because there are a lot of flaked bones, the small fragments, and what our paleontologists describe as kitchen remains.
Thank you, Arina. Are there any other questions to Arina? If it's not the case, then we have one question to Nataliya Berezina. Nataliya, are you with us? Still?
Yeah, I'm here.
There is one question on chat to you. So the question was, which site was shown on the second slide with this huge accumulation of bones?
That is Jean-Jacques. That's a picture of William Rendu and his excavations. That's France's site, Jean-Jacques.
I see. So this is the answer to Anna.
I think everyone can see this now.
Yes.
Great. So, всем коллегам в Новосибирске добрый вечер с Нью-Йорка. Спасибо за приглашение. Вам всем. Now I'm going to continue. Today I'm going to talk a little bit, to reflect a little bit on some of the implications of changing our mode of documentation in use-ware analysis from the classic methods that were pioneered, of course, by Semyonov, and then developed all over the world, to the 3D digital methods that this workshop is focusing on. And you'll see here ironic sort of quote about the philosophy of science, how useful it might be actually. It's been attributed to Richard Feynman. And I'm going to argue that actually it will be much more useful to us than ornithology is to birds. First of all, just to make it clear, what do we mean by the classic approach? It's simply a question of a certain set of protocols that were typically made during the acquisition of data. Basically, in the classic approach, the data consist of images collected from archaeological and experimental specimens, and the experimental references are created through the approximation of an ancient task. So the two are then matched by the analyst through analogy in a kind of pattern matching. The limitation, the data acquisition and type of experiments also determine the mode of inference, which is in this case is holistic, such that people speak of butchery or woodworking traces and so on, including entire prehistoric tasks rather than simply identifying specific material properties necessarily and motions and so on. Of course, that is also done, but the ultimate goal, of course, is to reconstruct full behavioral patterns. Part of this is also in terms of the how to learn this method. It is highly dependent on the apprenticeship model. Many hours of observation of an expert by an apprentice, and learning how to identify various things. And part of that, of course, was due to the original limitations, due to the use of film and the impossibility of image stacking that was plagued part of the earlier attempts. What do we mean by the new approach? And of course, by new, you'll see, of course, that it's not necessarily that new. It's basically responding to some of the critiques and also taking advantages of some of the new possibilities that have of the technological developments. The critiques in particular were that it's very subjective and that it takes forever to do, so that it's very inefficient. And some of this can actually be alleviated by quantifying the data. So instead of just relying on an image, you start to look at the actual topography of the surface. Another of the critiques was and this is actually within the discipline itself, is that that people do not necessarily know what is actually going on at the microscopic level, like how traces form and so on. And there have been many debates within the first sort of and second waves of the discipline, and also of the equifinality of some of the traces. So that there's been a shift towards more controlled, but also continuation of replicative experiments. And there is more because of doubts on the ability of experts to replicate their own and also other people's results, and also because of the again time inefficiency of analysis. There has been a call for a more open science model that uses essentially recipes, published protocols, and so on, in order to actually get more people to work on these problems and to standardize a little bit some things. And of course, there is always the specter of automation here that I will briefly address at the very end. So what is left today of the classic approach, as we've seen in this conference so far? Most, a lot of people are moving towards the use of 3D images, and of course, as Hugues himself noted in this 2008 paper, the transition to digital is not simply a switch of the photosensitive surface, but the concretization of a new principle that is mathematics based. So this is actually like an in-kind sort of change. But of course, and this is, like I said, it's not necessarily that new. And because we're here in Novosibirsk partly, here's an attempt by Semyonov and Shilinsky from 1971 to use an interferometer to quantify the roughness on the surface of stone tools. So with that, if the primary data is now mathematical, it leaves replicative experiments a little bit out of balance with the mode of analysis, because the analysis must match like with like. So therefore, the experiments probably need to be quantified as well. So at this point, it becomes important to talk a little bit about how the apprenticeship model will also work under the if the data is different, acquisition is different, and if the experiments must change also perhaps to match it. And in this case, I'll use some of the terminology from this book of Michael Polanyi, The Tacit Dimension, which talks about the tacit knowledge that specialists often have. And in particular, this, I'm going to talk about two things: interactional expertise, which means being able to talk about a particular body of knowledge using the correct language, even being able to participate in knowledge transfer among experts. And this is predicated on a lot of primary source knowledge, which you can see over here, which means that people are able to parse and read and understand technical literature. But it's also based a lot on the contributory expertise, which is being able to actually perform and create new knowledge by performing experiments, acquiring data, and so on. And one of the critiques, as I said before, of the classic approach was that one needs to basically move to a place where there is a specialist and essentially spend lots and lots of time with that person learning how to do these things. So what's involved? What kind of specialist tacit knowledge do we expect to be involved when we transition from 2D to 3D? So we have a new vocabulary for describing things. This is actually, nowadays we talk, you've seen a lot about parameters and things like that. There's a lot of mathematics, and this is part of acquisition, different types of methods, confocal interferometry, focus variation, all of them are based on different principles. There is also, there is also the mathematics of post-processing of the data that acquired, including cutoffs, outliers, significance testing, and so on. And then last but not least, of course, we have the physics of tribology. And these are, which is the science of how, things rub against each other and contact material, what happens on the microscopic level when materials come into contact. And these are all things that archaeologists, most of whom have a humanistic education, cannot really catch up on so easily now that the technology is available. In terms of contributory expertise, there are things that people might not know, and this is something that Ksenia mentioned yesterday when she asked how easy it is to do some of these things. And I here have to disagree a little bit with Alain. There are quite a lot of things one has to learn that it's not even that easy to talk about. So the properties of different instruments, how they behave. There are issues with what scale to choose for your analysis. There are even just simple, practical issues of how to position specimens so that the data acquisition is actually works at various different objectives and so on, which take a long time to come up with. There are, of course, issues with molding, number of points measured, and so on and so forth. So I would actually say that the amount of tacit knowledge involved in gaining contributory expertise with using these tools is actually about the same as in the old, in the classic sort of approach, probably. And so one of the possibilities, of how to sort of mix these two approaches is to adapt experimental protocols such that that they can work with the same sort of paradigm, but be updated for the new acquisition methods. So these, of course, they must still be relevant to the prehistoric tasks. They must record in this time, though, physical parameters of those tasks, right? So that we can actually say which kind of quantitative increase in some parameter on the surface is related to some kind of parameter of the task. And we have to figure out which of those parameters are relevant. And then last but not least, we have to see how to replicate the passage of time. So things like the use of the tool by more than one user, or the use of sort of irregular use of the tool, recycling, and all of these kinds of things. So just from my own experience, when we first started doing some of these monitored experiments, this is 2013-14, we tried to actually kind of keep some relevance to the performed task by keeping different, for example, hafting arrangements. And you can see here we used a tag and some sensors to be able to actually measure all the forces that would be applied to the tool, because that was what we care about. You can see some here, some of the measurements that you get there. This is all published in a paper we published in PLOS ONE in 2015. So I won't dwell on it too much, but you can see here that we can measure the torque and the force at the tooltip and all of these kinds of things. Here you can see the actual vectors of force. So you can sort of imagine how this might play out on the wear that's generated on the tip of the tool. We then decided to pass this information on to a robot so that we can actually streamline and improve the creation of a set of reference collections. And with this, we generated several tools that we then did two things on. One of them is we actually visually classified them as into unworked and then 3 levels of increasing levels of polish. And then we also measured the ISO parameters on them. Again, this was published in a paper in 2019, and it's part of Johannes Pfleging's dissertation at the ETH in Zurich. But here, for example, I just show you some of the results, and one of the more troubling results for us was that this is the SA parameter, the arithmetic mean height. So this is expected to go down with the number of cycles, and also to go down with the increasing force. As you can see here, we have from 30 to 110 newtons in force there. And this is not significant for most of them, except for 110 newtons there. So, okay, what's going on here? The visual classification, on the other hand, if you just essentially do the same thing, looking at the surfaces as they were classified, visually into very polished, not so polished, and not polished at all, and so on, they actually give good results in terms of this. So I'll come back to that at the very end. But you can see that actually some of the expert knowledge that was part of the classic approach, it'll turn out to be still very relevant. There were some critiques of our study, not least of which was that the human gesture was not realistic, and that's the one that I'm going to address in the remaining time. And also that the wear was not realistic, that it was too constrained, that the movement was too constrained, and so on. And then last, but if you want to see more stuff about that, I can show you later. But the idea that the robot cannot replicate the human movement, that's not true. So we decided to team up with one of our critics, in this case, Sylvie Berry, and we performed a series of monitored experiments in 2019, where Sylvie herself actually and Eugénie Gauvry-Roux, they performed the experiments using gestures that had been observed by Sylvie herself directly in her ethnographic fieldwork, and then taught to Eugénie. So in this case, we have an expert and an amateur here, and we have several different kinds of hafts here. And this experiment is also supposed to be a test of the apprenticeship model in a certain sense, because Sylvie and Eugénie published a paper in 2018 where they actually published a set of criteria for telling apart the different types of movements that were used with these types of scrapers. So they basically say that they can identify this. And so now we've actually processed these stuff, and we will send them back these tools for analysis without knowing which ones came from which tool. So we will see if they're able to do it. Meanwhile, we will try to test the open science model. We will try to see if we can, in some way, derive solely from the from what their criteria that were published, along with the data that we got from the movements, to see if we can actually identify it ourselves. So, and this is some of the results of the trajectories of the two-sided hafting. Here, for example, you can see very high forces. That was one of the critiques, is that, oh, you don't use enough force on your things. But actually, when you look at the downward force, the one that would actually, that's actually at the contact surface, it's not that much. It's still only about 50 newtons. And this here, for example, we catch the orientation, so we should see how the wear is expected to be spread on the edge. So unfortunately, we have only the data that I can present, only the data from the movement, from the monitoring. In this case, we can see big differences between Sylvie, the expert, and Evgeny, the apprentice. In this case, Sylvie is using a lot less force than Evgeny. So this is something we're hoping to have ready to present at the Aurana conference in Barcelona. So, so stay tuned for that. Finally, just going back to why humans are sometimes better, and this is just some of the data that I'm just showing you one of the pictures of striations from one of the tools that we got from this experiment here. The left is a composite with the 2D image superimposed, and the right part is the just the topography. And you can see that visually you can see the striations very clearly, but in terms of the topography, it's much harder to do. And of course, when what we care about in this particular case, of course, I could use a higher resolution lens in this, and it would probably be better. But of course, the field of view would be really small, and I want to actually look at the angles of these, compared with the edge as well. So there are certain aspects in which here it's clear that visual inspection of these is actually reveals something that we are not able to figure out mathematically. And part of the reason for this is you can actually see it turned on its side. This is a exaggerated topography 2 times. So that's why it looks so jagged. But you can actually see that this line, which appears lighter colored there, which we perceive as the striation, has an RA, meaning height, a parameter, linear height parameter on the polished line, which is only about 5 to 6 nanometers less than the other lines. So it's actually very, very subtle, but we can see it. So in this particular case, how do we automate finding something like that? How do we express it in quantification? So since I don't have that much time, I'll just quickly jump to the conclusions. The 3D involves a lot of tacit knowledge as much as the 2D, so we have to be careful with that. In the case of these new approaches, we are entering into a lot of uncharted territory for archaeologists. We have to collaborate with people who really know the mathematics of all of these things, that can really understand how surfaces change. One of the solutions that I think is necessary will be to not to abandon realistic experiments, but to monitor them so that we can actually understand which parameters are relevant from the point of view of the expert user and experimenter, but also which ones are relevant from the tool's eye view, so we can actually measure what forces are on the tool, and which parts of the tool are in contact for how long, and so on. And this too, unfortunately, involves contributor expertise. It's very, very difficult to operate this kind of monitoring setup. And we still don't have a archaeologist user-friendly motion for it. So we are still collaborating with engineers for it. And in terms of automation and learning directly from published data or recipes and protocols and so on, I don't think we are quite there yet, but there is a possibility to have a machine-human collaboration here. And I'm optimistic that in the end, we will be able to improve these things so that we can spend more time doing interpretation in the true traceological way that was originally pioneered by Semyonov and his disciples. So thank you very much, and sorry for the technical problems and lateness and so on. So if there are any questions.
Thank you, Radu. Any questions to Radu?
May I?
Ksenia, yes, of course.
Yeah, I just want to, when Radu gave his talk, I just remember that when he was writing an article about hammers at Chigurskaya cave based on Useware and 3D modeling. So we've got a huge discussion with our traceologists because traceologists use a specific terminology, specific pictures, and specific everything. And they tend to use 3D only like a picture, so without any explanation or something like that, because for them it's really everything is clear with 2D photos. But 3D, it's with 3D, it's possible to show everything for the regular archaeologist and to make it more clear and more understandable. So I says that is why I think that 3D and controlled experiments could be could make closer Useware specialists and archaeologists who use their production.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's true, but I think that behind the 3D there is a lot of stuff that many people don't understand, and I don't say that I do understand all of it myself, not even close, right? In fact, I would say that most of us are probably approaching this kind of interactional expertise on it. Like we are able to talk about it, we are able to kind of talk about these concepts and use them and so on. But contributory expertise in this is really it's still only really the engineers and some people who have spent a lot of time with this at this point. So I'm a little bit I think we are in like really deep in this now, and we have to try to figure out what we actually can learn as archaeologists and what we can't learn. What can we actually farm out to other people?
Thanks, Radu. Are there any questions? I think.
Yes,
yes,
maybe.
There is. Yes, please.
It's not a question, it's just a thought. For sure, we cannot change the technical evolution, but I have the feeling that we're in a historical moment when things are changing, at least in our disciplinary fields. And as I observe, for example, in my laboratory in Passia, now the topics of research, the problematics, and so the training of the students are changing. What I mean is that those new approaches, which are giving more data and more control on very precise parameters, are also very money consuming, but it's not a problem, but time consuming. It means that its work, such approach are slower than what can do an expert. For example, in the subjective approach of the past, when you put Jacques Pellegrin on a prehistoric assemblage, in half a day, he was able to give you the main operating sequence on the basis of his personal experience. But it was an experience learned on a very long time of training, 20, 25 years, 30 years. For sure, we cannot expect all colleagues to have the skills, the level of expertise of Jacques Pellegrin, for example. But with these quantitative approaches with expensive equipments, which are time-consuming, we see in PASSIA Lab, and this is part of the success of the impact factor of the laboratory. Now we are focusing on a few artifacts, on a few samples, just to access to question of cognitive evolution, symbolism, and so on. But we have less and less time, less and less money for doing the fundamental basic work. It means that if you have three bits with some ochre and assemblage, this is not all the assemblage. And it's important to have probably a systemic approach to know, to document all aspects of the material culture. And I have the example of a student who was the best one, the first one for the master. And she did not find a grant for doing thesis because it was for a very classical approach. It means learning all assemblages. And so I am not criticizing those new approaches, which are fascinating and which will give which will open new doors. But this is a time of transition. We're observing a change in the scientific strategy, and I wonder if whether what we get on the side is not lost on the other side. And is there still money, time, journals for, I should say, fundamental classic archaeology, or are we at the beginning of a kind of hierarchy in the organization of scientific research? It means students with a very small money doing the basic work, and people with a high rank papers and a reputation coming and picking some nice artifact to put them in the big equipment. So it's for sure it's a caricature, and we have seen in the evolution of science, of evolution of technology, each time there is a new technology, there is intermediate time where everything is confused, and then the new technical evolution find its own coherence. But no, we are at the boundary between what you call the classic and the new approaches, and this time is a bit uncomfortable because for myself, I have the feeling that we cannot keep everything. So how will be the balance between is new and what we are about to lose, and which was a basis, fundamental basis of common scientific culture among archaeologists. But for sure, we will not find a solution or agreement by internet. It should be necessary to be together with good drinks and evenings in the same restaurant.
Just one
kind of meeting.
If I can just have a quick reply, because I 100% agree with you. If I could, I would put every single microchip under the microscope. I want to. That's my ultimate goal. I want everything to go under the microscope. But and that's why I think that in the end, automation will have to play some role.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. but the question is like, what are the limitations of it? And what I don't want is exactly what you're saying. I mean, I don't want there to be this thing where we worship the machine. You know, it's like, oh, we have this really cool new tool, and we can just now apply it to everything, and let's just try see what it does. But rather, I think we have to decide, okay, this machine is good for this other machine is good for that. Humans are best at this, and we proceed with that in the future. And that's what I hope we can emerge from this with.
I have an idea. We need to put the chip not only to microscope, but in every student. It will be cheaper.
Very good.
Thank you very much for the interesting discussion. And I give the voice probably to Arina, if there is nobody else.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think we can move to our keynote session. We have two talks. And the first, I think it's the talk of Professor Ksenia Kolobova, the head of Digital Laboratory of the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography of Siberian branch of Russian Academy of Science. Ksenia, please mute your microphone. And just one notification while we're waiting for Ksenia. Please, if you don't want your talk to be on YouTube, because we are going to save our streaming on YouTube, just please email us and we will cut your talk from the streaming. And also we will be happy to get feedbacks from you also by email, so in our Twitter account. What do you think? Do you want such meetings happen every year, or it would be more useful to organize a kind of meetings in different topics, not only 3D and so on? So we will be happy to get feedbacks from you.
May I ask now, do my screen visible?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a really good idea to talk with mute sound and so on. So I do really want to stream my talk because it will be the first presentation, presentation of our lab, and I want to present you what did we do for 2 years of our existence. We are not so developed as the Leora's lab. We are, how to say, daughter's lab of Leora. And we are inviting everybody to the collaboration. We are interested in all the common experience. So when we began to study 3D modeling and everything like this in Russia, so we were late, I think, for about 15 years in comparison with European or US methodology and experience of 3D science. So we was trying to be fast and to do something to be enough involved and to be enough scientific. So the biggest problem was to get from the picture to the science, to the scientific data. So, and one of the first problems, it was to show to first of all, to Russian scientists that we can do something more than good picture, and and they can do something more than nice picture, like 3D models, and only for the visualization. So what did we do for this? So here in our lab, we have several scientific equipment, which includes several types of the structured light scanners, including one scanners with the highest resolution we could buy, and also we have a profilometer, which is a really useful instrument to study the tiny details of the archaeological material or archaeological artifacts, different type of archaeological artifacts. So first of all, we published our methodology of scanning, including different mistakes that could be appeared during the scanning in Russian journals in Russian language, and so it was quite useful because all the mistakes are like mistakes in calibration or every such mistakes it took place, and sometimes if you're just the beginner, it will take you for a while. After that, so we are doing 3D, so we cannot be far from the visualization and documentation. So now our anthropologists in our institute, they're using us as a creator of the pictures, and here is a picture of the Altai princess from Pazarik. You know her because of her very famous tattoos with a deer. And so it appears that her head is removable, and we were able to send our colleague to the museum in Gorno-Altaysk, where the princess is located. So he took the princess head, he scanned it, and also he cleaned the scan from those part of the soft material of the soft tissue that was possible to remove. And now he is trying to print it in 3D printer, and that skull will be used for the reconstruction of the physical appearance of the face by Gerasimov method by our anthropologists in the institute. Before it, all the reconstruction of the princess, it wasn't really a scientific one, because it was it had been used with a huge approximation. And it was also not possible to do something with because it's the princess for the several years is in Gorno-Altaysk, and in that city it's quite difficult to find a really good CT scan. So it was only possible to take a scanner and to scan it in the museum. So, and actually before that experience, I didn't know that the head is removable. To show the advantages of the 3D modeling, one of our colleagues, she performed a small study based on comparison of the time, labor, and financial consuming when you are using photograph, technical drawings, and 3D scanning. So here we compared only single scanning, not that possible in Leora's lab. It appears that the only disadvantage of the 3D scanning is cost of the equipment, and it should become more and more widespread in the future. In future articles and future works of the archaeologists. So, and the graphical and technical figure or picture, it's the most time consuming, and it takes too much time to prepare the specialists to do it, and to make and to produce it. Also, we was trying to show how what kind of advantages is it possible to get with applying three-dimensional modeling in the Stone Age studies. So we published also in Russia such kind of paper, so where we show how it's possible to make metric, highly resolution metric measurements, volume measurements, measurement of center of gravity and center of mass, and so on. And also we showed how it's possible to make to to draw the negative. So here we refer the LEORA 3D artifacts, but that negatives have been done by geometric design. So it's quite time consuming, but anyway, so it's a different approach which makes possible to draw the negatives, and it shows it's very useful for the scar pattern analysis, because scar pattern analysis made on 2D, it's flat, and if scar pattern analysis would be possible to do in enough quantity with 3D, it will be possible to move it, for example, in supplementary material, so it will be much more informative. It will become much more informative. Also, we began to study not only the Paleolithic artifacts, but also art objects from Bronze Age. So here we was playing with the anthropomorphic figurine from Novosibirsk, from Turis II, made on ivory, and using useware, and also using 3D modeling, we reconstruct the function of that figurine. So it was some kind of like pendant on clothes. So the function of the figurine shows the center of the mass that allocates lower than holes from both sides of the figurine, and also the direction. Here is the direction of the holes, which is really typical for such kind of artifacts. Also, from the same side, it came the figurine of deer, or Arina, как лось?
Moose.
Moose, yes, sorry. It is moose, very typical for the Bronze Age, but the principal investigator was thinking that he find the two pieces from the one moose, but it have not been connected to each other, because one part of the figurine was lost. So we performed a small statistical game trying to answer if the pieces came from one figurine or the different figurine. It was not that easy that we thought at the beginning of the study, but finally, so it's comparing the metrical parameters, and which was made with really high resolution metrical parameters. So we can answer that yes, so it came from the one figurine, and we did the verification with the different artifacts of the same site, which were quite flat. So, and we think that it's also the kind of method could be easily used to try and to recognize belonging the fragments to the same artifacts for every flat artifacts like ceramics or everything like this. The next investigation, so we was trying to study hammers and retouchers. Now we are trying to study retouchers with the profilometers, which allow us to make high resolution measurements. And here is the article that I just told you, that we had a huge discussion with our useware specialists when we was trying to make the results of the investigation of hammers and lithic retouchers closer to the regular archaeologists. So finally, so we are deal with the common schemas showing the most typical traits on the different types of the hammers. and retouchers. And we had the only problem with the hammers on bones because it was possible to recognize only with microscope. Here the picture about my yesterday talk, and I don't want to have to spend your time. Here we was trying to study of cut marks on ornament from Holocene layer of one of the Altai site. It's decorated marmot task. So we performed an experiment. So we investigated the way how such cut marks appears, and it appears from that movement. And after we did the experiments with a different type of raw material and with a different type of size of the flake that could be produced by. And finally, using measurements, we could answer that by small flake or small bladelet made on good raw materials that is possible to find at the site. Also, we have a huge experience using 3D as for the demonstration results or just for the visualization, but really nice and with really nice photos. And also the part of the our laboratory is focused not only on 3D modeling, but also on statistics. And here the one of the example of the of adaptation of statistical analysis to the spatial investigation. So using I think using here correlation analysis and clustering, Cummins clustering. Also, we are dealing with geometric morphometric analysis because in Russia, so geometric morphometric analysis had been used to really rare, and especially in Paleolithic research. So we had before our coming, we had only several examples of the geometric morphometric analysis of the pottery all over the Russia. So we think that it's this method as a method that could be verified easily, so should be improved. And I think that everybody will agree with. So we published the method in Russian, so it will be really useful. So here is an example of the application of the method with Gradient Leora software. And here we use it in our article where it was possible to prove that the morphology of the cave messer and bifaces of plano-convex bifaces from Chigirskaya cave is the same as European cave messers and plano-convex bifaces, and it was one of the main evidence for the second migration of the late Altai Neanderthals to the Altai from Central and Eastern Europe. So it's funny, but before the application such methods, so with all other statistics and so on, our paper have not been accepted. Exactly after application of those results, we have been accepted immediately. I don't know why, but anyway. So also we applied geometric morphometric analysis to the bone retouchers. And the next part of our investigations is the creation of the new software thanks to Ravil and Katerina Bocharova. So this program is really useful. Also, we are trying to study different handles, and we are performing an experiments and investigating the holes in the bone tools, and it appears to be less regular than we expected. And now we are trying to investigate the relationship in between holes and microliths inside it. Also, we was trying to study ceramics with 2D geometric morphometrics, because 2D geometric morphometrics is quite useful instruments. So we need to use various instruments. So here we will study ceramics scraper under the leading of Marina Nesterova from our institute. So, and what kind of information did we get from geometric morphometrics? So our, how to say, point of view about the shape of the artifacts has nothing related to the reality. So if you think that ceramic scraper is round, it is not always so. So here the geometric the PCA plot showing that sometimes we're thinking that for example, ceramic has a square shape or rounded shape, but it really isn't. Also, but the best, how to say, scientific results we've got not from the geometric morphometric, but from the statistic analysis of the metrical parameter of the ceramic scrapers, where we found that the scraper, all the scrapers of different shape, it had been used up until they become this parameter where two main dimensions become equal. So before it had been used, and after it, people just threw it away. And that kind of regular geometrical shape of the ceramic scrapers, it's so it means that we are deal with the final shape, with the ceramic scraper as the final shape of the utilization. Also, we are trying to study the petroglyphs. Actually, we also performed 2D geometric morphometric to the petroglyphs, but it is really complicated shapes, and we discovered that the shape is really influenced by the occasional, how to say, by the occasional parameters or features. For example, it if the surface of the rock wasn't if on the surface of the rock wasn't possible to make a long legs of the petroglyphs, and humans in that case draw the short legs, so it's really influenced on the final results of the PCA, and the shape of the petroglyphs become too complicated to study with. So we can study something very simple in case of the shape, like horns, like part of the face, and for example shape of the legs, but complete shape of the petroglyphs, it's too complicated for us, and it doesn't give the reliable information. But we also studied not the linear measurements, but we studied the proportions of the petroglyphs, and it appears that the proportion of the petroglyphs, it plays a really significant role in distinguishing of the style of the petroglyphs. So using different types of analysis, like PCA and discriminant analysis, we clarify, for example, that 5 variables is very distinguishable to separate Minusinsk style and Angarsky style in Minusinsk in Minusinskaya Kotlovina. And so I think that studying of the petroglyphs is also very promising direction of the investigations. So that's it. I want to tell you, thanks for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, Ksenia. Any questions?
Hi, Ksenia.
Hi. Once more.
Yes, it was nice to see that you're developing this lab. I didn't understand the point you made with the scars. As you know, we have something that we segment scars. Did you do it differently, or you did it manually?
Oh, we did it. Yes. And
okay.
So the scars we did only using geometric design. So they have an instrument that it's possible to create the scars with. And after we was trying to use it with scar pattern analysis, so it's possible.
Mm.
So that segmentation algorithm inside the geometric design. So, but it's really time consuming because the scars is not always how to say recognizable by this software, and you need to make quite many corrections, moving the how to say moving the border between scars, trying to complete the scars picture. You also need to draw something. Yeah, but at least it's a possibility. One of the possibility. Second one is your software.
Yes, I think at least for the beginning, for the automatic segmentation of most of the scars, we found a way, and also you could monitor, in a sense, the degree of segmentations from the relative size, from very smaller scars to larger ones.
Yeah.
And also for the symmetry or the rounded things, well, we could talk, but because I also showed it yesterday, the new mathematical perspective that looks for the spherical harmonics. Remember that follows the degree of something that is distance from the geometric form.
Yeah, I think that you're right. We didn't study the center of the mass and the center of the ceramic, the center of the symmetry of the ceramic scraper. I think it could also give some information. So we applied only metrical measurements, 2D geometric morphometric, and that's it. So I think that it's a good idea. Thanks. I think with the rounded things, it will work out.
You have many scanners?
So we have several portative scanners. It's like David, but yeah, I think the same quality. And we used to take it abroad. We used to take it somewhere in Russia, like with a Princess. One good resolution scanner for the one regular scanner with good resolution, one high resolution scanner, and one profilometer. So up to now, it's quite enough for us.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that scanners become more and more available for the people. Yeah, and especially even in Russia, that everybody who got some kind of one of the project from the foundation, it's possible to buy scanner, and it costs like $5,000 and not more. So it's very useful.
Yeah, and it could be very fast also to scan really many artifacts. So
yeah, and to study a technician also, it takes not so long time. But I don't now. I'm not talking about brilliant technicians. Yeah, but so everybody can study it. For example, if you compare with an artist, so it's a huge difference. And so, yeah, I think that it will be, future is now, and it's also our future.
But I agree with the discussion before that we should always remember to save and the knowledge that we have from traditional ways. Maybe we can document easily blanks and cores and tools and do it like in a more industrial way, very fast, and analyze assemblages. But if there's something special and unique that we want to publish, I still think we need a draftsperson, and we still need people who know very well the lithics. And so the trick is how we preserve, work both ways, work together, the computational and the traditional, of course.
Yeah,
it's like when the total station came to the excavation, you know, and people were used to the Nevelir, so no one is not using a total station anymore, but we still have the traditional way of excavating in many ways. We combine.
Yeah.
And I agree, it's quite of a task. It's a big task.
Yeah. And also we're trying to save our ancestry, and in our lab we are now scanning as many artifacts from our museum as it possible to keep it, and maybe to publish published artifacts, to the library, and in case of some accidents.
Yeah.
And so if your dream will be, will become truth about the scanning of the huge amount of the artifacts, so it means that the dream of all the archaeologists become truth when it will be possible to make refitting from the huge amount of scans. So because my brain doesn't work with refitting at all.
Refitting is not a problem of quantity. Refitting is a problem that it's a very, very complicated mathematical challenge.
Yeah.
Because it's a partial surfaces, and it's not trivial. But we should also ask, why is it so important to have these huge assemblages refitted? But
it's very nice to have refitted assemblages. You know, as lithician, it's one of my dreams. But now with mathematics, we are going back to the Radu's talk when he mentioned that mathematics should be one of the most important parts of the new type of the investigations.
Yeah, I believe we should produce archaeologists that know mathematics.
Yeah, so we need some kind of hybrid.
Exactly.
Mathematologist. Something like this. Yes. Thanks for the questions.
Okay, we already began discussion, I see. So we still have one more speaker, Professor Hugues PLISSON from University of Bordeaux, the head of Artemir International Research Lab. Hugues?
Yes. Do you see something?
Partially. We see the puzzle of your presentation.
Oh.
Yes. Yes.
Do you see my screen?
Yes, but it's
not complete. I have something.
Yeah, it's loading. It's just very heavy. Yeah.
Have you my screen visible?
Yes.
Yes. Wow. Fantastic.
Yes.
So back to the past of 3D when it was no longer necessary to have a very big, expensive computer. I will present you some example of what we have done with 3D in the frame of two French-Russian cooperation in the framework of the International Associated Laboratory Artemir, which was a virtual laboratory, and with a new international research laboratory, ZooScan, which is a concrete, real in-Muros laboratory. So Artemir, it was a topic was multidisciplinary research of prehistoric art in Eurasia. And the partners of the first 5 years, this time it was ELIA, Laboratoire International Associé, but then after CNRS thought that it was better to have English name. So the ELIA was with several French and Russian partners, 3 universities, University of Bordeaux, University of Savoie, and University of Novosibirsk, State University of Novosibirsk, 2 institutions of the French Ministry of Culture, it means Centre National de Préhistoire, and the Museum of Prehistory of Les Aisies, and on the Russian side, the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography of the Siberian branch of the Russian Science Academy, and the Institute of Automation, and for the 5 new years, which started with 2 years of COVID, I don't know if we will go longer, we have reduced with the real effective concrete partners. So now it's more active with colleagues who are used to work together. So the first 5 years, the co-direction on the Russian side was the Professor Bova, while now for the 5 new years, coordination is done by academician Molodin. So why this topic about art? Because of parallel between the center of Paleolithic, Paleolithic art in Western Europe, in France and Spain, and some sites in Russia. Between, not so much, but it must be a question of preservation. And so you have a parallel between 2 mammoths, one of Rouffignac in Dordogne, other one from Karpova. But in fact, we can extend the comparison at least to Altai, where petroglyphs in Paleolithic style were discovered in the 19th by academician Molodin, and also in Mongolia, not very far, 25 kilometers. And so the aim of the associated laboratory was to put together specialists of both sides for sharing the same method and techniques for making comparison, because in fact what we have with these similarities are the visible part of Paleolithic networks. So one specificity of this international laboratory is to share field works on both sides. It's based on the kind of symmetry reciprocity. So Russian specialists are coming to work in France, and French specialists are coming to Russia, and we work together on different aspects. So you have the list of the common sites. So the 3D did at the center of the project. First, because in this time when we started, it was a good way for getting money, but also because it's a very useful tool for doing a lot of things. I am about to show you what we have done with 3D. But first, we started with a big conference for the opening of the project 6 years ago already in Novosibirsk, in Eurocity, and with a presentation of a movie done only with 3D images, and this movie is about the Chauvet cave, which has been presented as it was in the Paleolithic time, and this movie has been presented in the big kinotheater of Novosibirsk before being presented in France. And so, for doing 3D, first it's necessary to learn, and we have organized different training. We started in France, here with Laura Lescott, and maybe you can identify some Russian young colleagues, such as Lydia Zotkina or Katia Botsareva on the left. And the training has been done on the different aspects. Here we have a recent training with a software for microcity model processing. It was 1 year ago. Also, we organized a training in Russia, in the university, and we took part to different multidisciplinary seminars, as those ones. And so, rock art has been the main object of study, of practice for the 3D. We started, in fact, 1 year before the project with another funding from both universities for testing the resolution of photogrammetrical approach. And it was quite good, because it's possible to record submillimetric details, but you know this better than me now. And we started to do kind of traceology and petroglyphs, such as in the Kalbaktash, where was a very atypical structure with linear grooves. And in fact, thanks to experimentation, we have been able to prove that there were recent structure, at least at the end of 19th or beginning of 20th century. And those grooves have been replicated using metallic adds. And thanks to 3D models, it has been possible to see very specific details which were not visible on the site because too small, and because also of the color. And here with the 3D model, it became evident. Also, specific traces in English, stick slip traces means that the corner adds was not moving regularly inside the grooves, and so we have some kind of little wafts, and this is absolutely specific of the use of this tool. And so traceology, question about tools, how the petroglyphs were done. We have extended to other sites, such as Shalabolino, where there are petroglyphs, different styles. It's a very real palimpsest of petroglyphs. And so with photogrammetry, we try to find a way for distinguishing impact from lithic tools, impact from metallic tools, on the basis of schemes published by Evgeny Mikheev. And thanks to 3D, it has been possible to make this easier and more precise. At the beginning, we were just using cross-section for distinguishing the impacts. And then Lydia Zotkina with Vasily Kovalev have developed a specific software with machine learning for making automatic distinction based on the fact that metallic impacts are more regular than lithic impacts, because the lithic tools are quickly used, and so the tips change and the impact trace change accordingly. And so it's possible to make this evident automatically. One big question is how to read the palimpsest of figures. So one example from a Mongolian site, where Lydia Zotkina with Catherine Feta has been able to do the relative chronology of the different figures. And they have shown that the one in the Paleolithic style, such as in Kalguti, was the first one made on the surface of these big blocks. 3D kind of multi-purpose tool. You have seen in the conference, in the lecture of Laura Lescope, that it can improve the reading of the petroglyphs. Another application has been done on the shelter of the Le Poisson, so as to identify, to understand strange concavities on the ceiling. And with experimentation that Lydia Zotkina, Catherine Feta, and Serge Marie have demonstrated that they are in fact the remaining part of hooks. And so those hooks, in fact, have been, well, today were only the lower part, and they have been destroyed by a flaking of the ceiling, which probably occurred during the Aurignacian time. And so it's given an indication about the edge of the figure of the fish. So other application on a site where we have been working together, a lot of young colleagues from Novosibirsk came to this site of Fourneau du Diable in Dordogne, conducted by Malvina Bowman. So 3D for making topography. This is a work by Anastasia Nikulina 3 years ago. It's for making profile of the structures, for getting a better view of the site, site with the relief and topography difficult and with a lot of vegetation. So on the model, you can cut the trees. It's easier than in real life. We forget that 3D can be very helpful for making 2D images. When, for example, here you don't have enough room for catching the structure on one shot. We have seen a lot of examples during the studies. 3D opens the possibility to make computing on the models. Here, for example, application from Laura Lescope, it was to measure the volume of dump to see if they were in accordance with the ancient excavation done by Denis Perroni 1 century ago. So we have measurement of both. So it is one possibility of 3D. And a work which has been stopped by COVID, I hope you will be able to continue, and to put back on the site to find where the block with carved balls, where it comes from, because it's a very strange. We just have only this block, but we can imagine what it was just one fragment of destroyed shelter. And this book is very important because it's the only, it's one of the two only example of Solitran rock art. And we imagine that it's not Solitran but Magdalenian, but for that we have to put it back on the site, to take into account geomorphology, petrography, and so on. But it's one challenge interesting, and 3D can be helpful also for that. This is the work by Lydia Zotkina. And the second laboratory, more concrete, since he has a roof, the one building, in Novosibirsk, organized by William Rendu, with the co-direction of Sergei Vassiliev. It comes from the collaboration with involving Artemir And so now this laboratory is specifically dedicated to archaeology, and with different kind of approach, equipment for cement chronology, for protein identification, and so on. And one concrete aspect is a common field in France, in Jonzac. It's a very interesting Moustaian Kina site, with large concentration of carcasses of bones. And this is the direction is shared by William Rondu and Ksenia Kolobova, and with Sveta Schneider. It's excavation also for training students for both sides. And so 3D, of course, is useful on the field for getting the view, complete view of the excavation, for recording each artifact, and for having distribution, vertical, horizontal, those artifacts. And so it's just the beginning. As other situation, so 3D can help to come back to do observation which are not done in situ in the field. For example, here, anatomical connection is something very important for the taphonomy of the site and for paleoethnography. And so it has been documented by the 3D, but not seen directly on the field. And you have seen yesterday the work of Malvina Bowman with micro-city analysis on the faunal elements from Jonzac and from Chegevskaya, which were tools. So you have here some examples which are not in the lecture of Malvina, of beautiful bone tools from Jonzac. I like very much the one on the right. And so 3D, it's like today, it's like a Swiss knife. You can do a lot of things with 3D, and no, it's very easy, it's very simple. If you have a camera, and if you know, of course, how to use it, but normally any archaeologist knows how to use a camera, then any computer you can buy today is sufficient for making 3D models and for starting to do useful things for archaeology with photogrammetry. And you have no excuse not to do this, since there is a wonderful software which is made in St. Petersburg, Metashop, before it was called Photoscan. And so it's becoming as common as using a word processor. So no excuse for not using, doing 3D. Of course, we have seen that there are also very big, very expensive equipment. So not everybody can have access or opportunity or condition to use them. But those are two complementary types of tools, and I think so it's a wonderful time now, since we have the choice between different ways of using 3D and for making for reaching a new dimension in the type of result we can and question we can access with those equipment. So just do it. It's wonderful. 10 years ago, it was a dream. So thank you for your attention. Some colleagues in 3D.
Thank you, Hugues. Any questions to Hugues?
I don't have questions, but I want to mention that Hugues already began the discussion and almost finished it with his last words or sentences. Yeah. So about Radu.
Yeah, hi. I have a question about the Mongolian site. I'm not really familiar with it. The rock art site where you have the horse engravings and so on. Was there were also on one of the panels there appeared to be some pictures of maybe ibex or some other kind of maybe domesticated animals and so on. Is it mixed? Is it like, do you think there, well, you said that there was a stratigraphy and the ones that look like Paleolithic are the oldest. Was that always known that there were some that looked like Paleolithic, or are, you know, was that a hypothesis, or did you discover it while you were trying to document it and so on?
I don't really understand your question.
Okay, my question is that there are lots of these panels. We have them in Kazakhstan a lot everywhere, where they're just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drawings, right? So was it always known that some of those animals might be older, or was it that while you were scanning the whole thing, you realized, oh, some of these look Paleolithic?
In fact, we went to the Mongolian site because it's very close to Kalguti on the KOT plateau, where discovered the very strange figures, which they were published in the 19th by Calvin Melodin and Dimitri Cheremisin. They were on the stylistic criteria. So they were published as being possibly Paleolithic, and so one goal of the project was to find different criteria for at least respecting the range of hypotheses. And so with the traceology, different things. Here I have presented that we have a datation in Kalguti done by I forgot the name. Cosmos something. Cosmogenic. No, it's
cosmogenic nuclides.
Exactly. And yes, and so thanks to just the cat, we can say that the site was accessible just after the last glacial maximum. It means it was open around 17,000. So it does not prove that the figures are Paleolithic, but it proves that they were not in the ice. It was accessible part of the mountain. What is interesting in the Mongolian site is that we have animals which are known to be Paleolithic, such as mammoths, and to prove that those figures are the first one done on the surface is another argument. That so far, it's not like in Chauvet or other caves where you can pick a pigment on the wall to get the direct datation. It's this indirect approach, but it's a work in progress, and it's interesting because the question problematic. There are different ways of interpretation. For sure, we can have convergence of style, but in this history of history of art is not common to have an independent way of doing the same thing. It could be the result of a common origin and independent evolution, but to have during Upper Paleolithic, to have not only the same style but the same organization, the same type of animal, the same semiology. It means that that's something in common. I don't say people who are meeting them each other. Maybe something interesting in Russia. Maybe those practices were longer. Maybe they were still doing this during Mesolithic. We don't know. But there is something which is common to the Paleolithic world, and we have to understand what was the connection. And so stylistic technological approach and any type of datation are useful for converging. But so far we have not the solution. It's just one small part added to the puzzle.
And it also was ostrich petroglyphs in Mongolia, so
yes.
Also quite well known, and
yeah, but
no doubt Paleolithic.
But it can
it's painting in the cave. It's painting in the Hoytsenkera cave, yes, in Mongolia and Altai.
So there is a very interesting challenge, and we should continue.
And now exists the method, it's called ore soil rock surface. That is possible, ore soil rock surface, which is, this method is developed, I think, in the Roskill laboratory led by Andrew Murray. And they need only a sample that thickness, like 3 centimeters. Of the rock, and they will measure when the surface have been opened.
Okay. So as we did in Ukok. Yes. On the
and did you get results?
17,000 BP.
From the rock surface or from the cosmogenic, because it's quite
from
different.
The rock surface.
Rock surface, cool.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Is it published? Yeah.
Still not. I praise my colleagues, but the one who is responsible of that is professor. So,
cool. That's great.
So we have to wait for him to have time to publish, because when it will be published, you can be sure that the results will be of the first quality. But quality needs time.
Yeah, but the results, it is the quality itself.
And but the petroglyph was there; they will not move.
But how did you take the sample? Because it's a little bit disturbable.
Yeah, but this work has been done by a geomorphologist, a very famous geomorphologist of Editem Lab, under the direction of Jean-Jacques Delannoy. So
okay.
they know perfectly the job.
I have a question with your presentation. A short one goes back a little bit. You discussed that it was possible to distinguish between the marks, if it was done, in what tool it was done, right? And it was done by machine learning technology. Could you elaborate a little bit? Was this published or?
Yes, it has been published.
Okay. I missed that.
I will send you the reference on the other Kina can provide you.
I missed that. Okay, thank you.
More than send you the reference, I have the PDF. So just, I have not your email, but is it fine? And I send you.
Okay.
It's very interesting work, but no. Vasya is in America, and we are waiting for him to continue, because it was a very, very, very promising approach.
Yes, it's not true. We're also trying to do something very similar with machine learning. That's why I want to understand what they managed to develop already. But it's not trivial at all. It has many problems of identification, mathematical problems. But so I look at it. I missed that. Thank you.
With pleasure.
Okay, any other questions to Hugues? So if you don't have more questions, maybe Hugues, you can continue our discussion, because we already began, as I see, if you don't mind, of course.
About what? About my pessimism?
Just about your point of view about the talks that we've heard for the last 2 days, and about 3D application in general.
I think it was a very stimulating meeting, because it showed what is possible to do. When I say possible to do, it means concretely possible, and it opened new windows. And I hope that a lot of students will have seen the conference via the YouTube streaming, because I think it's a good inspiration for them. Because for sure, people of my generation will not change because, for example, my knowledge in mathematics. If I became archaeologist, it's because I was bad in mathematics at school. so those approaches are not for me. I'm sorry, but this meeting is a good offer good inspiration for students. So I hope that we are not only 20 together speaking, but also people can take ideas for those presentations.
Thank you.
I think you're right, because at the regular conference you will find 3D here, here, and here. It's like bread and butter with a thin layer of the 3D modeling. Somewhere mathematicians, somewhere controlled experiments and useware, and here it was quite concentrated. And and we can conclude that we are not the regular conference. We are something special. And yeah, maybe it could be a good idea to make it periodically. So if somebody will be interested in.
But we should also continue the collective training, such as in the previous years, for students and for colleagues, and for sharing experience. And I was thinking about something about microcity. But for sure, internet it's a good tool, but we have to also to be together, and so we could imagine something part in video conference for those who are not able to, who are opportunity to come, but also to be concreted together as we did in the past before COVID. We must think about something like that, because before I say 1 2 years ago, microcity was like photogrammetry at the beginning, like a dream, but not accessible for most of the people. For example, when I listened about photogrammetry, I was looking for a computer, and I had to ask to my laboratory to provide me a computer with Unix system, because it was not cheap software working with Windows system. And now anybody can do photogrammetry with this computer, and it's becoming to be the same thing with the microcity. It means that now in the supermarket, no, not exactly supermarket, but now you can start buying computer which are strong enough. For example, the laptop of Malvina, she's processing most of the city model with her own laptop. It's just a laptop of gamer. It means that it's no longer expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for processing, but I say for making archaeology with the model, for providing a new hypothesis and so on. For sure, the scanning still is costly, but PASEA Lab has been able 5 years ago to buy his own equipment with a regional money of different type of brands. So to have the computer, to have the equipment for producing models, but model too big for being able to process them, it's useless. But no, the common computers, I say, not the basic one, but with computer gunners, you can process city models. So it's become possible for archaeologists. And so I think it's time now to start sharing experience with this type of softwares and equipment. And to have opportunity to be again together.
Yeah, and you're right. You mentioned the COVID, and I think that during the COVID we have one huge advantage that we can share the models. So
Yes.
Yeah, Magda, I have a truncated facet from Sukhaya Mechetka now. Yeah, from the Volga region, from Mikoken.
Not surprised.
Yeah,
I would expect that. Nice.
Yeah, but it wasn't published, but it's and it have been called by different type of the tool, and so, but it's the real one, the same as the Chigurskaya. So if you need.
Yes, please.
Yes. Yeah, so yeah, we have some advantages, some disadvantages. This quite complicated time. We'll see what will be further with Corona, with the new variants of Corona. So nobody knows what's possible to expect. Yeah, especially in Russia.
Actually,
sorry.
No, okay. Yes.
Welcome, please.
No, I just want to continue Ksenia's thought. Yesterday, Leora raised a very important question that we need a kind of library that will work like Google to keep all our 3D models. Because, like, for example, for my project, I really need this, like right now, to keep somewhere my comparative collection of the bones. So, and just I want to ask, maybe somebody already have a kind of solution for that, kind of thoughts about this, how it can be organized, the work, and so on.
It was one of the. It's one of the advantages of, for example, microcity, that now in the additional documents, the publication, you can put very light 3D models, and now the resolution of such models start to become good, and it means that 5-6 mega you can already have interesting information about the objects. So it means that having a kind of online library will not be very costly, but the question is to organize this in a logical way, because if it's just to put in line 1,000 and 1,000 models, and for what? But no, already we have the solution to include in the additional information of the papers, to include a small PDF, and so to give the opportunity to colleagues to see by themselves. For example, the paper published by Marie Soressi, William Brandu, and several colleagues about the Moussaïen smoother of Pêche de Laz and other sites. I was very glad to be able to have my own view on the artifact and to compare the type of rounding. And this is objective information, even if it is not described in the paper, even if the colleagues who wrote the paper did not focus on this aspect, you have the information. And so it's a kind of primary, very primary data and objective fact, and it's very helpful. So it's a first step of what you dream about. It's to give access to 3D model. Already we can do it in the publications.
Okay, thanks.
No, it's my how I see the things in concrete way, because in archaeology it's always a dream to have a big database, but after that, if the information is not organized, it's good for, we can get money for doing that, but after that, is it useful? Or we are example of a very useful data, for example, library of paleogenetic, when someone wants to compare his result with what is available. So library are very important for sharing information and basic results. But the question for 3D models is like, in fact, we have no database of traceological marks because there are different reasons. Because it's not like studying insect, you just have to pick one 2D image and to say, oh, I have the same thing. Then, sixth question: what type of information for doing what? And so, so we have to define the. Let's see,
well, if I
logic for making this.
If I can barge in, first of all, I agree with you that we should publish in PDF 3D models, and I think some of our publication even have links to this model, and I think it's becoming more and more popular. You're right, but beside that, I think that because we are collecting so much data, we should have. Maybe I'm dreaming when I'm saying Google or some sort of a large database, but we should have a standard for sharing. Because there are several things that we should decide what should be our standard, so we will be able to compare and share all this data.
Yes, it's a question of standard. Yes.
Yeah, and there are slowly but surely, I remember a few years ago, it was impossible to upload 3D models and to see them quickly, and unless you really open it, and sometimes it's heavy and so forth. And now there are really nice solutions. So it's time maybe to build some sort of a database. We are trying in our laboratory because we already collected many artifacts. We're trying to develop this kind of a standard, and we had a platform that broke recently, but in general we should have some sort of a search, an automatic search that we could do through these 3D models, as there is for 2D pictures. The same can be done to 3D models, and then indeed we could share much more information.
First, technical standard is the first fundamental aspect.
Yeah, and of course, all the softwares and all the programs, both that are developed and should be shared.
A lot of things to do.
Okay, anyone else wants to tell something about our seminar? Any opinions?
Maybe a word of caution, because we have a very performant equipment and more precise analysis, but the way of doing archaeology has not changed, and particularly in techno-traceological fields. It means that we are always working on the basis of actualist references. It means on model, experimental model, ethnographical model, or any types of models. I say not 3D model, I say elements of comparison. We are producing, or about which we have enough information for comparing with archaeological artifacts. And experimentation is a kind of concept. It means that you scrap a bone with a flint and you have done experiment, but you cannot compare such experiment with, for example, what Jacques Pellegrin is doing when he's reproducing long Grand Pressigny daggers. The skill and so on are not the same, but anybody is doing experiment, and this is the concept experiment can cover very disparate, very different things which are not comparable, and the quality of the result of the data produced with very precise analysis depend completely on the elements for comparison, on the level of actualist data, that element of comparison. And so we have to be careful about this. It's not because you produce very complex mathematical result that they are relevant if the elements for comparison by themselves are not in correspondence with the archaeological reality. For example, experimentation technology. What about the skill of the person doing the experimentation? And is there a way for measuring the skill? When in a paper, when a paper is published by Jacques Tixier, Jacques Pellegrin, and so on, a very famous technologist, you see the name, you know the quality. Okay, so when they say that experimentally they have such conclusion, you can't believe them. But when someone is not known, you don't know his skill. So when you say, "Oh, I did experimentation, I have a net fleet," or so on, and so what? See, after that, you can have all the objective possible measurement for producing, for processing the data and so on. At the beginning, if you have no way of assessing the quality of the experiments, so all the construction of the demonstration is weak, and so there is always it's difficult to stay objective during all the process. Because you take a bone, you break it, it's experiment. And so what? It can be experiment, but it's not technology. Or what we call technology is far from what did prehistoric guys. So we cannot cut the relation with real things. And these things need belong to the, I should say, belong to the whole world. And in a lot of publication, just a few words, we did experiments. Okay, or some bibliographical reference according to, and then after that you have a very serious processing of the data. but the weakest part can be the experiment, because the experiment is not according to the standard of the time, what it was the basis of technological approaches under the control of people like Jacques Tissier, that was people sharing experience, meeting each others, and was the kind of a community of people sharing their knowledges. But it was a small community. Already we have changed the scale of the scientific community. And so all people napping flint, for example, cannot meet each other, it's tours. So no, I have no solution. It's just a concern. Sometimes when I read paper and I see the experiments, what is written, described about the experiment, I am afraid, because it's not what we learned in the past with people like Jacques Tissier, François Borde, and so on. So maybe this world is disappearing, and we're entering in an artificial world where even the napping of flint will be done synthetically by computers. I don't know. No, it's a subjective question. So, I am missing my what was familiar for me when I was student, and kind of another scientific tradition, and particularly because the French School of Technology was very strong, and it was a common language. And no, for sure, this language was among a small group of researchers, someone from America, but it's a specific community, and this community is disappearing. And now we have computers.
Look, we are now in the process of the publication of the article when we are mentioned that all our experiments made by experiments, experienced experimentator, and so on. And you're right, but before, when you are getting such experimentator like Tissier, you will become old. And so I don't know what could be the reason to call person quite experienced experimentator. So that I don't know. One of the objective could be that controlled experiments, as Radu mentioned. And the second one, I don't know, for example, if the napper is working like for 3 years with the experiments, so he could be called as experienced.
One aspect about the experimentation that, in fact, most of experimentators are autodidact. They learn by themselves, and those are their own personal practice. And already, when you compare between different experimentators for simple things, you see that each one has his own particular way of doing it. And it's not necessarily the same as done by prehistoric people. It's certainly not. For example, when Malvina Bowman started a study of Solutrean bone tools, and it was not so different than the Mousterian ones, reason why it's familiar for her. And she found the retouchers. She presented archaeological samples to Jacques Pellegrin. He said, "No, it's not possible to say they're too big, too large." No, because he was not used to work with such type of retoucher, of a compressor. He was more in the, should say, Paleolithic tradition with very small tip, and the certain ones are very large. And the first reaction of Jacques Pellegrin was, no, it's not possible. And Serge Maurice said, well, yes, give me, oh yes, it's very efficient.
Yeah, Serge Maurice.
Those are the different tradition of experimenters.
Exactly.
Radu wants to.
Yeah, actually, that's a fantastic example. That actually in my mind it sort of makes me worried about what famous experimenters might be doing when they're, like what the kind of their expertise is there for sure. I mean, and I by the way, I don't know these famous guys personally, so I don't know. I've never seen Jacques Pelikan live. I've seen movies of him and so on in Tixier, and I'm in awe of their ability to produce various stone tools, but they are people who use electricity and cars, and I'm sure that so they're not really, they're not enculturated in a stone tool using culture. So that doesn't surprise me at all. That story is a wonderful example, exactly why everybody should exactly specify what they are doing when they are doing these things, and be very careful to monitor what's going on, I think.
So when you're exploring something on an experimental basis, maybe it could be safe to ask to different experimentators to do the same thing. And it's an approach done by Laurent Claric. He did a study about learning about beginners in finite mapping, and he asked to different colleagues to do a very simple thing, just to observe variations on this simple technical aspect.
And we slightly moved from 3D to experimental.
After that, we can do 3D.
So I can connect it back to 3D and tell you that we did with the geometric morphometric for lithics, we did experiment. We used the program. We described the program with the analysis of artifacts that came from various stages of skill that we saw of nappers. And indeed, when you want to define the skill, you have to take a few parameters and see it's all relative, as you said. So there are things that we can even quantify it and just give some sort of ranking of skill and put it into some sort of a scale. So it's done, and it's important in many cases.
Yeah, the ability to produce symmetrical artifacts. Yeah, it's one of the features of the skill. The experimenter. Yeah, when I was asking Serge Marie to produce planar convex bifaces, he just asked me several questions about the technology, and after he produced it. So in several minutes. So I think that is a skilled experimenter. Yeah, but I think in any case, if you are not famous, so it's quite difficult to prove that you are skilled, that you're working for a long time, or maybe you need to mention the publication with your experiments, for example.
And you can provide some 3D models of your experiments. For example, you say, I have done a Kina scraper replica.
Yeah,
provide the model. Anybody can verify if they are as acute as the archaeological ones, for example.
But Kina is not the most, how to say, the most complicated example.
But already you can be impressed by the quality of the edges on the archaeological samples, and not anybody is able to get a very regular and acute edge with such morphology.
I know how to produce ugly Kina, so I'm a specialist. Yeah. So.
Oh, just in fact, I wanted to say that we must keep the link with the roots of our disciplines, and not to replace what was done in the past by computing. Computing is one more stage, but you need to keep the strong basis of a common scientific culture and approach.
Yeah, exactly. And 3D modeling or geometric morphometric could could not be the only way to study artifacts or something like that, but the part of, for example, when we proved the migration of the Neanderthals, we use technology, typology, and geometrical chromatic as a I don't know, as a cherry on the cake. Yeah, so everything works better if it works together. So,
yeah, multi-proxy, yes, for sure.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and so I think that so yeah, such a strange conference when everybody is agreed with each other, and you know it's some kind of boring. Yeah, and then so I think that now we can conclude that the conference was not bad, at least not bad. It was interesting, and if you have a possibility, we will do it once more. Maybe Francesca will lead us, for example. Yeah, because your approach is very, very, very scientific. And yeah, because we need the new blood, new members, and new leaders. Yeah, for example, if you will invite us for the next conference, so you will come with pleasure.
If I will have a place to invite you, I will surely.
Yeah. So I think that we should finalize the conference. Thanks to everybody. Thanks for your agreed to participate. Thanks for participation, for your interesting talk, and see you soon, all of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye bye. Thank you for organizing all this. It was very good.
Yeah, bye.